Hi there and welcome to Power Play on this Wednesday evening. I'm Vashi Kapelos in Ottawa. Tonight, Pierre Poilievre's future and the state of the Conservative Party.
Last time I checked, Pierre Poilievre never came out in our election.
I hope they do some soul searching on, what they believe it means to be a Conservative.
Provincial Conservative premiers weigh in as we all wait to hear from Pierre Poilievre, who has not surfaced publicly since losing his own seat. Will he stay on as leader? And what's next for the party? In moments, we're going to talk to re-elected MP and former party leader Andrew Scheer. He'll join me live in studio. Then, what about the NDP? Campaign Director Jennifer Howard will also be in studio for a post-mortem on the election that ended in her leader's resignation and the party's loss of official party status. Plus, White House visit?
He's a very nice gentleman, and he's going to come to the White House very shortly.
Donald Trump says the Prime Minister is heading stateside within the next week. We'll preview the PM to President relationship with our front bench. Sharon Carr, Jamie Ellerton, Carl Bélanger, and Hannah Thibodeau will be here. That's coming up in just a bit. First, though,
I shouldn't interfere in the federal election. Last time I checked, Pierre Poilievre never came out in our election. Matter of fact, him or one of his lieutenants told every one of his members, "Don't you dare go out and help the PCs." Isn't that ironic? But anyways, I'm not going to dig deep into this.
I think the Conservative Party of Canada was very good at pushing people away, not so good at pulling people in, and I think that they probably saw that in some of the results they had across the country. I think the Conservative Party of Canada, I hope they do some soul searching on, what they believe it means to be a Conservative. There are many, many shades of blue.
some harsh words for the federal Conservative Party from their provincial cousins taking aim at Pierre Poilievre's strategy. The Tories did win their highest vote share since the late 80s Monday night and increased the number of seats, but still lost to the Liberals and failed to win the popular vote, something they've held the past two elections. And leader Pierre Poilievre lost his long-held Ottawa area riding and has yet to address that loss publicly. So what is next for the party? With us now to talk about that is former leader Andrew Scheer, who was again re-elected to his Regina seat by a wide margin. Hi, Mr. Scheer. It's good to see you.
Good to see you too, Vashi.
I appreciate you making the time for the conversation. I know from a statement that you released yesterday that you want Mr. Poilievre to stay on. Has Mr. Poilievre decided that he will?
Absolutely. Pierre is a fighter, and he's doing it for the people who have been left behind for this government. That's really what inspires him. The Liberals have caused so much hardship for people, and we heard those stories across the country. People who are still living in their parents' basements because they can't afford to own a home. People have lost their jobs and their livelihoods because of Liberal anti-energy and natural resource policies. And he's really inspired by those people who are counting on our party to deliver that real change. So we had incredible gains. He led our party to historic highs in every corner of the country, gained seats in every province. We're disappointed that we didn't form the government, but there's a lot to build from here. And Pierre's inspirational leadership got us here, and his continued leadership will be what delivers a victory next time.
Why did it fail to secure his own seat?
Well, look, I mean, even in his own seat, he saw an increase in votes for himself.
But he lost by 4,000 votes.
No, but when you look at the utter collapse of the NDP, I mean, I come from Saskatchewan, the birthplace of the CCF and Tommy Douglas and all the heroes on the radical left, and they came in third. Every election I've ever fought in since 2004, the NDP were in the low 30s, high 20s. Last time I checked in province-wide, they're 7.5%. So that is at play in a lot of areas. Some of the seats that we weren't successful in, we saw historic gains. We saw massive amounts of new voters. There's a story to be told there about all the new people that Pierre has attracted to our movement. I mean, people who say that some of the criticisms I just heard on the leading to the show, they're just not looking at the facts. The facts are more people voted for us than ever before. We got a higher percentage than ever in the modern Conservative history, and we picked up seats that we haven't held in some cases in 20 years. So did we do enough to win? Clearly, we have more work to do. There's another step to this journey, but there's an incredible base of support here that we could not have achieved without Pierre Poilievre's inspirational leadership.
I think you're pointing to comments from Premier Doug Ford in Ontario and Premier Tim Houston in Nova Scotia. And I take your point about all the gains, and I think that's a completely fair comment on what happened. But like you said, it wasn't enough to win. And the Liberals actually increased their share of the popular vote by more than yours did after a record that you've spent 2 years criticizing and gaining in popularity for criticizing. You still couldn't clinch a win after a 10-year record of the Liberal government that you have told Canadians repeatedly is terrible for them. Why is that not about more than just the NDP's failure? Why doesn't responsibility for that lie at Pierre Poilievre's feet?
Well, look, we're going to go through the process of finding out exactly what the campaign got right and what the campaign might have missed, or what the calibration that might need to be addressed going forward. But at the end of the day, when we look, there was a massive shift in the political landscape when Justin Trudeau stepped down, and quite frankly, we had a new Liberal leader that didn't get a lot of scrutiny from the media, didn't get a lot of the same tough questions that Conservatives tend to get, and immediately went into an election campaign. So it drastically shifted the landscape. Obviously, it's our job to win elections as political campaigners and as party systems. We don't do it for ourselves. We do it for those people. We do it for the people who are counting on us. And that's where our disappointment is today, is that there were so many people hoping for that real change. I mean, almost 42% of Canadians were hungry for something completely different. And now Mark Carney is going to go down and double down on all the same policies as Justin Trudeau. So clearly, it's tough after that. But let's not lose sight of the fact that we are in an incredibly stronger position, that we are so much closer than ever before. I think at least, 7.5% more than we got in the last election. Huge gains to build on here. New caucus members from areas that, by the way, are ground zero for being threatened by U.S. tariffs. I mean, we picked up seats in Windsor. We picked up seats in Hamilton. In my riding where we make steel, we held on to all those ridings. All the places in the country where people are directly affected by the threats of U.S. tariffs, forestry, mining, oil and gas, potash, manufacturing, steel, we won those voters. So what we need to do is we need to look at what is the next step? What is that gap to get the other few percentage points that we need to form government? And that's what we're going to be doing over the next days and weeks.
If I understand you right, though, you're saying it's the fault of, it's basically because of what happened to the NDP. It's the fault of the media. I mean, you have two conservative premiers, with respect, you have two conservative premiers saying it was the strategy employed, that essentially Tim Houston said the Conservatives are pushing more people away than pulling in. These are Conservatives. This isn't me just making it up.
It's just demonstrably false by the facts. The facts are it doesn't make sense.
Why didn't Pierre Poilievre talk to Tim Houston or talk to Doug Ford? Isn't that weird?
You can't simultaneously say we pushed people away when we got more votes. That's just factually incorrect. That doesn't work on a mathematical level. I don't know what else to say. I mean, we got more votes, we got a higher percentage, we won more seats. Clearly, we weren't pushing people away. We reached historic highs. That's just a nonsensical statement that doesn't hold up to a second's worth of scrutiny.
But it's coming from a person who clearly feels like there was no outreach to the people who supported him and to him himself, right?
So supported who?
Tim Houston.
I'm not sure I follow the question.
He's making that statement based on what he has observed and his own
People
experience,
reaching out
which
to him?
he did. Well, he has said that there was no outreach, for example, from Pierre Poilievre to him.
So his
has Doug
feelings
Ford.
are hurt?
I don't know. I'm just conveying what he said, and I understand what you're saying, but I can't discount what two conservative premiers are saying. Like Doug Ford is the premier of the most populous province in the country. Like, does what he say not matter at all? Like, if he feels that no outreach was done to him or his supporters, isn't that something to just take stock of?
I just don't believe that's true. And again, we're in this not because we're worried about interpersonal relationships with someone like Doug Ford. We're worried about the people in Ontario who are affected by terrible Liberal policies. That's who we are listening to. That's who we're thinking about doing that outreach to and getting them on side and addressing their needs. And I'll point out, Pierre Poilievre got more votes in Ontario than Doug Ford did. Pierre Poilievre got a higher percentage of the vote than Doug Ford did.
Won a third majority.
More people
you have lost
in Ontario.
A fourth election.
More people in Ontario wanted Pierre Poilievre to be Prime Minister than wanted Doug Ford to be Premier. That is just the facts. So, do we have some work to do? Do we have to figure out next steps? Obviously, Vashi, we didn't win the election. that hurts, and it hurts for a lot of people who are counting on us. And that is who we are focused on right now. Those people who place their trust in us, the thousands of volunteers, the candidates who put their name on the ballot, the people who have lost their jobs and remortgaged their house to pay for bills. Those are the people that we need to talk to and show that we're still going to keep fighting for them. And that is what Pierre is doing. Ever since Pierre launched his leadership campaign, he has been consistent. He is fighting for those people who are left behind by Ottawa. When Ottawa caters to special interests, when the Liberal government rewards their friends and imposes a crazy ideology. I mean, Mark Carney has written a book extolling the virtues of the carbon tax. He said he's going to keep the carbon tax on the industrial side. That means job losses in places like Regina and Hamilton. So those are the people that Pierre is focused on. I wish Conservatives at other levels around the country would help, would be more cognizant of that it's about the people. It's about the people that they represent as premiers or as other politicians. It's not about settling interpersonal differences. I don't think Canadians care about that. I think Canadians are worried about how they're going to pay their mortgage, how they're going to move out of their home and start their parents' home and start a life for themselves.
But don't
and
Canadians
that's what we're going to be
also want to
focused
see,
on.
for example, somebody who is running to represent all the things you just said, the interests of people who feel left behind? Don't they want to see that person working with other leaders and working towards better outcomes for everyone? You're dismissive of, for example, for the Premier's support in Ontario. He won a third majority mandate. You have failed to win a fourth time around.
As I said, there are dynamics that we have to figure out to make sure that doesn't happen again. But again, more people wanted Pierre Poilievre to be Prime Minister in Ontario than wanted Doug Ford to be Premier. That's just a fact.
But
I'll tell you
lost.
what Pierre Poilievre
I
didn't
just feel
do.
like it sounds like you guys are in denial that you lost. Like I won, but I lost. Like I don't understand.
Who's denying that?
No.
I'm just saying
get
your
that you built
prescription is to do something that Premier Ford seems to be asking for. I'm just pointing out that, well, for sure we have to take a look and take stock and say, what do we need to do to win next time? I'm just pointing out that Pierre Poilievre is he's popular. He's more popular in Ontario than Doug Ford is, just based on the votes. Like that's not a subjective opinion. If we just count ballots, that is just an objectively true statement.
Didn't the Liberals win the popular vote though in Ontario?
No. Federal, I'm just saying when you're talking about popularity, when you're talking about base of support, these are just facts. I'll tell you what Pierre Poilievre didn't do. Pierre Poilievre didn't endorse Bonnie Crombie. Pierre Poilievre didn't praise opponents of Premier Ford and the Ontario PC party. So, look, I think it's time. What I would say to everybody in Canada, every Conservative, every type of every level, we can all agree that Liberal policies will be bad for Canada. So let's work together. Let's work together. Let's stop this kind of thing, this kind of finger pointing. We will absolutely take a hard look at what decisions were made and why were they made and what data went into making those decisions. What do we need to do to be successful next time? And again, not because we want the blue team in and not because out of our party's sake, but I'll tell you, actually, I knocked on doors in every corner of this country. The despair that people had if the Liberals got another term was real. I mean, we had people weeping, crying, telling us their stories at rallies and on the doorstep. People weren't just saying, we hope you win. They were saying, you gotta win. And that's what's disappointing today, knowing that we weren't successful. And that's what's gonna drive us to put aside all this back and forth with other Conservative politicians. That's what's going to drive Pierre to stay focused on those people and their stories and bring them hope again. So it's early days after the election. There's a lot of work for us to do, but I can tell you that Pierre is fighting and he's driven by that need to restore that hope for Canadians.
Does he feel a responsibility for letting those people down? I remember years ago speaking to you after your loss. You won the popular vote. You lost against a majority government, the Liberal government. You brought them still to a minority, though. He lost the popular vote and couldn't win after a decade of the Trudeau government and 2 minority governments. Like, why was it appropriate for you to step down in that instance, but not for him?
I mean, to compare these results to 2019, I don't even mind saying I was leader in 2019. Pierre was leader this time. Massive gains, actually.
But you won the popular vote.
This is we're in the early days after the election. There is no one that could have built up this team, this platform, other than Pierre. I mean, it's almost like everyone forgets that that Justin Trudeau was a popular prime minister with a whole lot of support for his policies. And Pierre, through a systematic litigation of the damage that was doing to Canadians, forced a sitting prime minister who did not want to go to resign. Okay, that's no small accomplishment. So this idea that it was no big deal to go into an election with this kind of footing is just false. It took Pierre's vision, it took Pierre's leadership style to put us in the position that we were. We got 42% of the vote. That's more votes than.
But in January,
if I could just say, Pierre Poilievre got a higher percentage of the vote than Jean Chrétien ever got, than Paul Martin, than Stephen Harper, than Justin Trudeau. So we need to put this in perspective.
But they all won
clearly,
majority governments.
Yeah,
Not
clearly,
Paul Martin, but the other ones.
Okay, but clearly, we need to think about a few things about how we fell short and why we fell. No one's here denying that. And my message to those 8 million plus, or around 8 million, I haven't done a recent check, but about 8 million people who voted Conservative hoping for that change. My message is we get that there is disappointment. We get that we need to figure something else out to win next time. We're not taking that for granted. No one's saying here, that we don't have some work to do to figure that out. But there's an incredible base of support that only Pierre Poilievre could have done for our party, and he's the only person that can continue that and finish the job.
Will he run in a by-election? I mean, I know the government will call the by-election, but is it someone going to step aside in like a so-called safe seat? Like, has that decision been made?
Look, these are early days. It's 2 days after the election. It's something that we'll be addressing going forward. But I can tell you that Pierre is staying on. He's fighting. He's gonna work with our caucus. He's gonna work with our loyal volunteers and our activists to keep the momentum going. And I am very confident that as we get through the difficult days, the next days and weeks, as we figure some of these things out, we're gonna come out the other side with a more united team, with a bigger team, with more representation from more provinces. And Pierre is the man to deliver that victory in the next election.
In the meantime, while he's not in the House, will you be leading the party in the House?
These are
Still not decided. Okay,
yeah.
had to check. Okay, Mr. Scheer, thanks for your time. I appreciate it very much.
Thank you very much.
Andrew Scheer is a re-elected MP and, of course, former leader of the Conservative Party. We're going to dig into all of what you just heard with our front bench just a little later on in the show. Sharon Carr, Jamie Ellerton, Carl Belanger, and Hannah Thibodeau will be here. Plus, they're going to preview the relationship to come between Prime Minister Mark Carney and U.S. President Donald Trump. The U.S. president talked about their call yesterday, this afternoon. He said a White House visit is coming soon. Have a listen.
I think we're going to have a great relationship. He called me up yesterday. He said, "Let's make a deal." He was running for office. They both hated Trump, and it was the one that hated Trump, I think, the least that won. I actually think the Conservative hated me much more than the so-called liberal. He's a pretty liberal guy. But no, I spoke to him yesterday. Couldn't have been nicer. And I congratulated him. He's a very nice gentleman, and he's going to come to the White House very shortly, within the next week or less.
The Prime Minister's office wouldn't confirm specific timing for that visit, but does say it's coming in the near future. We're going to take a quick commercial break here on Power Play. We just talked about the Conservatives. Now we're going to talk about the New Democrats. The NDP's campaign director, Jennifer Howard, will join me live here in studio after a short break. Stay right there.
Everything's negotiable in politics, and one of the things that I'm already thinking about is official party status. That number is arbitrary of 12. The NDP voice in Parliament is critical. When you have official party status, you get question period time, you get a seat at committee tables, and you also get some resources, research and communications and legislative. So, I look forward to meeting with my colleagues and coming out with a proposal that we can bring to Parliament whenever it starts sitting. And we've ruled nothing out at this time.
That's Don Davies on this program last night, one of just 7 NDP MPs left standing after Monday's vote. The party losing 17 of its 24 seats, meaning it no longer qualifies for automatic official party status. What went wrong and what's next for the party? Jennifer Howard was the NDP's national campaign director. She was also Jagmeet Singh's chief of staff and is a former Manitoba NDP minister. Hello, Ms. Howard. Good to see you. Thank you for coming in.
My pleasure, Vashti. Thank you.
I say this with great respect, but it was a huge loss. It was a catastrophic loss for the party with status in the leader of the party. How do you explain it?
Yeah, it was a really hard night for lots of people, lots of good people that poured their heart and soul into the campaign. Really hard to see great MPs lose, great candidates. Really glad folks like Don Davies will be there. We just weren't the answer to the question that people were going into the ballot box, were going into to mark their X with. We were the answer for many of them, but not enough of them. And I think that's the reality. The question, throughout the campaign, the question that was put in front of folks, the narrative of the campaign was to elect a prime minister who was going to go and deal with Donald Trump, and we were not the answer to that question for a lot of people.
What responsibility does the party bear for not being the answer to that question?
Yeah, I think in the coming weeks and months, there'll be a lot of discussion about that. I think, this is not new that being the answer to questions about the economy is not often something that is a strong suit for the NDP. It's true in provinces as well. I was part of a provincial government as a provincial NDP finance minister. It's always a challenge to be credible on those issues as a New Democrat. So I think that is part of what we have to pay attention to in the coming years, is how we regain or get some more credibility on that, how we talk about the economy in real terms and people's jobs and how you pay the bills and how you afford a mortgage. I think we can connect with folks in that way. But that's work we have to do in the future. That's not new. That's not new to this campaign. That's an ongoing challenge for us.
I guess I have a question as it pertains to the uniqueness of Mr. Singh's leadership and the party under Mr. Singh. And to what degree do you think perhaps the agreement with the Liberals, for example, projected the image that the party wanted to be more about influence than power? And if ultimately you think that informed the way people in this country view your party?
I don't think so. We did a lot of research, a lot of polling, a lot of focus groups on the way to the campaign and in the campaign. For voters who were open to us, they saw the influence as a positive. They saw the dental care and pharmacare and paid sick leave and all the things we achieved as a net gain. They expect us to go to Parliament and actually try to get things done. Most people expect the folks they just elected to go to the House of Commons and try to work for them. I just, before I came in here, looked at my phone for a message from someone who I've worked with about their brother that's about to get dental care. Folks know that that's what we did, and they appreciate that. But that wasn't the question in this campaign. And so, I don't think that the agreement weakened us in that sense. I think the agreement made it more difficult for us to be a critic of the Liberal government, and it made it more difficult for people to see us in the question around change. I think that was the challenge of the agreement for us.
Was there a way to navigate the desire to see, influence over programs like dental care without entering into something formal with the Liberals? And I know that you used to get that question, and so did Mr. Singh for a long time. But I do think, just from the conversations I had with people, with Canadians on my radio show, for example, that it really that they started to link your party with the Liberals very explicitly, and it was very hard to extricate that.
Yeah, I think that's a great question, and certainly something I've spent some time thinking about. I think the reality is, in a minority government situation, the government in power knows that they've probably got a year to 18 months of runway. Very unlikely that anybody is going to want to bring the government down and go to another election right away, because usually that results in a majority for the governing party. And you can keep a government going and you can extract small things in budgets. But if you want to do something big, like dental care that takes multiple years to happen, or pharmacare that takes multiple years, I think the only way to get a big program like that off the ground is by providing stability for a few years in a row. So I don't think there was a way to get something like dental care or pharmacare, the beginnings of pharmacare, across the finish line without giving a little bit more security. And I think what we knew at the time we were talking about the agreement is, and I think what the Liberals knew, is they weren't worried about the first 2 years. They were worried about year 3 and year 4. And that was really why we were able to force them to do something like dental care, is to give them a little bit more certainty than just the first 18 months.
Toward the end of the campaign, Mr. Singh received questions about why didn't you get out of that agreement and essentially topple the government? Because you eventually, in September, got out of the agreement and said you would rip it up. But there was this confusing kind of back and forth about then what that meant for your support for the Liberal Party. Ultimately, it meant that the NDP supported the Liberals through a number of confidence votes. I was reading some analysis that showed the last one, the third one, I think, that you supported them at. At that point, you were projected to win 25 seats, and that was like toward the end of last year. Mr. Singh kind of tried to make the argument that he put country over party because he was so afraid of Pierre Poilievre getting in. Was that a mistake? And ultimately, isn't the proof of that mistake that there's no party to speak of anymore in an official capacity?
I don't think that's a mistake, and I don't think that's why we lost the way we did. I don't think the confidence and supply agreement had anything to do with that loss. I think, there were lots of factors that we didn't foresee. I did not have on my campaign planning sheet that Donald Trump would try to annex the country, or Chrystia Freeland would decide to, step down as finance minister the same day she was supposed to give her mini budget. So I don't think that's true. I do think what is true is there is a path in the fall. And there is a path, internally, we were showing a path to 40 to 50 seats in the fall. And I think there was a possibility in the fall, if things broke different ways, that we could even end up as official opposition. And that question was put to Jagmeet. We had that conversation and laid out, this is the path. The other likely outcome is that the Conservatives will win a majority and Pierre Poilievre will be the Prime Minister, and that will put dental care at risk because they were promising to get rid of it. We hadn't got pharmacare off the ground. So, that is the trade-off. And he could not bring himself, even though it meant ultimately that he has to step down as leader, he could not bring himself to risk pharmacare and dental care in order to win 20 or 30 more seats.
But it's not just him stepping down as leader. It's your party without resources, without a real say in Parliament. So now you've lost all the future influence that you could have had to make sure, for example, pharmacare is fully built out, or that the rest of dental care gets implemented, or whatever other programs you want to make sure are still in the window. Again, I think it's fair to challenge the idea that that was the most effective thing to do for Canadians even.
I think it was the most effective thing to do at the time, knowing what we knew at the time, and I think it was the best decision that could be made with the information that we had. There will be a process of rebuilding. It is painful to be where we're at. It is painful for me to know that this is the campaign that I ran, and I take responsibility for the outcome. But getting dental care for kids and seniors, and now hopefully all adults, if we can hold Mr. Carney to his word, I think most New Democrats believe that that is worthwhile. And it is an unfortunate reality in politics that sometimes doing the right thing comes with consequences that you don't always foresee, and this is one of those circumstances.
Are you sure it was the right thing? And I ask because there was a lot of effort by the New Democrats to say Pierre Poilievre will do all of these things, take away all of these programs. Ultimately, what he came out with in the campaign was not, I'm going to take away everything. Actually, his fiscal positioning around spending cuts is not very different at all than Mark Carney's. It basically involves a reduction in consultation or outside consultants and a reduction in the public service through attrition. He said he would keep dental care for the people who have it, child care for the people that have it. He wasn't the boogeyman necessarily that your party said he would be, and it came at a great cost to your party ultimately. Was that strategy an error?
Well, first of all, I don't believe him. I believe somebody who's voted against things like that for his entire 20-year career. I believe the votes, not the words in a platform on the eve of an election. But also the reality of a program like dental care, and I think what we knew is that unless people have it, unless they're experiencing it, unless they're actually sitting in that, it's a bad metaphor, but unless they're sitting in the dentist chair getting their teeth fixed, it's easy to take away. It's easy to take away the idea of something. It's easy to take away the promise of something. It's much harder to take that dental card out of a senior's hand or a parent's hand, or hopefully in the future, a person who doesn't have that care. I think that sticking it out, means that dental care is going to be very hard for any government to undo now. I don't think the same is true of pharmacare, unfortunately, and I think New Democrats and others are going to have to continue to put pressure on this government to follow through with pharmacare.
The last question for you is about the future. Are you concerned about any of the 7 MPs that were elected as New Democrats being lured over to government to help form a majority?
I am not. I think that I know those 7 people. I've worked with them. They are strong New Democrats. But I also would say, floor crossers are punished in this country. People voted for New Democrats. Anyone who voted New Democrat in this election and elected an NDP MP expects to get an NDP MP. And I think an NDP member of Parliament who thought that they could take those voters' wishes for granted and then disappoint them will find that they will be unelected very quickly. But I'm not worried about that. This caucus worked together in some very difficult times through the pandemic and through the last few years and came together and supported each other. And I think those 7 people that are elected, that's who they are. They're going to continue to work together and support each other.
I'll leave it on that note. Ms. Howard, I appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Jennifer Howard is the campaign director for the NDP. A quick note also, the Green Party is back to just one leader. Jonathan Pedno has announced he's stepping down after failing to win a seat Monday night, releasing a statement that reads in part, "I recognize we were not able to break through in a way that could shift the course of our country, and that is a responsibility I must carry. Twice now, I failed to convince my fellow citizens to send me to Ottawa. I therefore hereby submit my resignation as co-leader of the Green Party of Canada, effective immediately." Elizabeth May remains a leader, I guess, not a co-leader anymore, and she was re-elected in her riding. I'm going to take a quick commercial break. We've got a lot to discuss about the future of the NDP and the Conservatives, as well as what Prime Minister Mark Carney's government will look like. Our front bench will be here after a short break. Sharon Carr, Jamie Ellerton, Carl Bélanger, and Hannah Thibodeau. Back in a moment.
I shouldn't interfere in the federal election. Last time I checked, Pierre Poilievre never came out in our election. Matter of fact, him or one of his lieutenants told every one of his members, "Don't you dare go out and help the PCs." Isn't that ironic?
Why is there so much bad blood between you and the federal party? And how does the federal party start to build bridges now within the Conservative movement as they look to the next 3, 4 years?
Well, all they have to do is make a phone call. I like a lot of the MPs, but the people spoke, and they spoke loud and clear.
That's Ontario Premier Doug Ford earlier today when asked why his progressive Conservatives didn't publicly support federal Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre during the election campaign. Tensions between the two sides have been known for some time. Nova Scotia Premier Tim Houston also had his own criticism for Poilievre and the party's election results. Take a listen.
Were you unable to work with him in a certain capacity?
I don't think Riff would be I didn't have a relationship with him. I don't have a relationship with him. I think there'll be some lessons learned from this campaign. I think the Conservative Party of Canada was very good at pushing people away, not so good at pulling people in, and I think that they probably saw that in some of the results they had across the country. I hope they do some soul searching on what they believe it means to be a Conservative.
Those comments come as questions continue on what comes next for Pierre Poilievre after he lost his seat. One Conservative campaign source tells CTV News he's making calls to the grassroots like always, and that party members want to see him in the House of Commons, saying, quote, he will get a seat. With more on this, let's bring in our front bench. Sharon Carr is former Deputy Chief of Staff to former Finance Minister Bill Morneau. She's now a partner at Sovereign Advisory and did advise the Liberal campaign. Jamie Ellerton is a Conservative strategist and the founder and principal of Canaptus. Former interim NDP National Director Carl Bélanger is with us. He's now the president of Traction Strategies. And Hannah Thibodeau is a former news anchor. She's now an executive communications officer at Global Public Affairs. Hi, everybody. Good to see you tonight. Post-election discussion on tap. Hannah, I'll start with you. Those comments from the premiers are very interesting. I put them directly and to Andrew Scheer, the former leader of the party. He heard them, and we went back and forth quite a bit. The counter from the Conservatives is, we have more support than we did before. So the criticism from Ford and in particular Houston about pushing people away rather than pulling people in, they're fighting back against that. And Mr. Scheer did, certainly by arguing like, look, we actually got more votes in Ontario than Doug Ford was his contention. We increased our vote share overall quite substantially from the last election. What do you make of the push from the premiers and the pushback from Mr. Scheer?
So much to dig into there, Vashi. Let me just start by saying that was a big loss, though, for Pierre Poilievre to a government that was essentially a write-off just 2 months ago. And that's something I didn't hear from Andrew Scheer in your interview. And I think those are the types of things that maybe that humble voice needs to come through a bit more when speaking about the loss. Now, you talk about the fact, and I heard Mr. Scheer talk about this too, is that they were up in the popular vote. Well, let's look back on the past two campaigns, the one that was run by Andrew Scheer, the one that was run by Mr. O'Toole in the last two election campaigns. The popular vote was also increased by those two leaders. Where are those two leaders now? They are not leading that party. So there's a couple of facts as well. To give Mr. Poilievre credit, I do hear what Mr. Scheer is saying is that he chased out a prime minister. He was able to get rid of the carbon tax because although Mark Carney takes credit for it, this is something that Mr. Poilievre and his team really pushed hard to do. But history isn't going to be kind to Mr. Poilievre because of the fact that the ballot box question changed. It changed to Donald Trump, and he and his team did not pivot to that message. So whether he's able to get that support from his people across the country, we already see that the knives are out. And that is because he hasn't, and his team hasn't always been kind to people like Premier Tim Houston, like Premier Doug Ford, who both had and gained massive majorities in their election campaigns.
Well, even within the interview, there was a bit of a migration, right? You could tell Carl initially Mr. Scheer was really put off by those comments, but then, a few minutes later was saying we just need to all put aside these differences and work together as conservatives, almost like making an appeal to do so. Do you is that necessary? Do there need to be overtures from the federal wing of the party to premiers like Premier Houston and Premier Ford, or the other way around, I guess?
Well, it's much easier in politics to win if you can add people to your cause than if you subtract them. And in this campaign, clearly Doug Ford and his team were offside, and so was Tim Houston. And there were many conservatives, or progressive conservatives, I should say, that are not comfortable and were not comfortable and might never be comfortable with the kind of conservatism that Pierre Poilievre ran on. So the key here is, where do you go to broaden your appeal? Because if you're counting on somehow the NDP to come back and steal votes from the Liberals so you can win, that might not work. The party's in pretty bad shape. So where do you go as conservatives to go from the 40-41% ceiling that you've hit to go to 47, 48, 49, maybe 50%? Brian Mulroney used to do it. So where's the path? And that's where, you have to reach out to the progressive conservatives because they've won, they know how to win, and they can help you out.
Sharon, what's your thoughts on that? Because I do remember a lot of pushback from people after Aaron O'Toole. Like they said, that's what Aaron O'Toole tried to do. It didn't work. So why should we try?
Well, I think sometimes the idea of having a big tent is great. Every party, I think, tries to have a balance of that. But sometimes when your tent is so big that you alienate people that would be more, I would say, on the reasonable conservative front and kind of try to pander a bit more to the more right-leaning kind of borderline or even dipping into the PPC types, you just kind of create this dynamic where people become uncomfortable. You don't appear to be the person who is able to take on someone like Donald Trump because you're not necessarily being sensible on a lot of things. Now, Pierre Poilievre did pivot. He pivoted way too late, and I think that the division within the party was becoming really clear. But I want to go back to, I'm hearing the spin, and I've been hearing the spin since yesterday on the Conservatives basically saying, we got more popular vote, we've got more this, we've got more that. The only reason the Liberals won is because they got Quebec. Well, the last time I checked, there's no such thing as a participation prize for coming in second place in an election. And that constant spin that, I think the biggest winner in this entire campaign is the fact that we had a record high of voters who came out. And that number of voters voted against the Conservative Party and Pierre Poilievre. So they have a lot of soul searching to do. Me personally, as a Liberal and someone who was on the campaign, it's slightly entertaining to watch what's happening with the Tim Houstons, the Doug Fords, and even the inter-party stuff. But for a party, it's not helpful. And I think they're going to have to get themselves together at some point or another.
Let me jump off that point and ask you, Jamie. Look, I do understand, like Hannah does, the argument that there's a huge vote share, higher than they've seen since the 80s, that they did increase seats. But it does sort of take away the factors that existed last year, the way that things were supposed to go for the party. And I'm just wondering if you think that sort of as Sharon describes it, this constant thing that we basically almost won, even though we didn't, that view or that public positioning is going to take away from the ability to actually do the sort of analysis that's necessary that would lead to a win in the future. And that might include over Poilievre's own leadership.
Yeah, Vashti, I think you're kind of onto something there. I think what you're hearing right now is, frankly, a lot of spin. Everyone's just trying to win an argument today and hope people stop talking about it, and so they can kind of get on to whatever a new normal is going to be. I think there's some fairly big question marks as to what a Prime Minister Carney is going to be and how Conservatives are going to engage in the House. You heard some conciliatory messaging in terms of working with things to put Canada first, as Pierre Poilievre said on election night. And when you look at some of the platform items, you have Liberals talking about advancing pipeline resource infrastructure. You have Liberals talking about implementing a middle-class tax cut, not as big as what Conservatives were promising, but a tax cut nonetheless. And so I think if there's ways the party can advance on some of that and show that they're willing to make this minority parliament work, I think there's some ways where the Conservative Party can maybe pull the Liberal Party back to the right on their side of their spectrum and deliver real results and have the debate be whatever it's going to be based off how the next few years go and how long this parliament lasts. For the Conservative infighting stuff, I just don't think this stuff is helpful. I think there's obviously going to be a debate that's had over what went wrong and where and how to go about doing it. I don't think just throwing a sacrificial staff member under the bus as a sacrificial lamb to say all their problems are fixed is ultimately going to do it. I think Pierre's probably wise, frankly, to stay out of the media spotlight now for the next little bit and kind of let this conversation unfold, see who's saying what, and actually go on a bit of a listening tour to see what it is before he then comes forth and says, here, what's what I'm hearing, here's what we got wrong, and here's how I'm going to fix it. And I think when you look on some of those issues, I think he's got a real potential to kind of live this. I mean, you kind of look back to 2019 and 2021, I guess it was, when Aaron O'Toole won, there was broad-based dissatisfaction that just doesn't exist within the Conservative Party right now. There's disappointment, but generally speaking, Conservatives like Pierre Poilievre. They like what they've saw with the results, and they still have hope in him. So I think he's going to have the space and maneuverability to navigate this in a way that Andrew Scheer and Aaron O'Toole never had.
It's a good point, but we shall see, because I remember covering both of those, and it took a few weeks, but eventually the knives started coming out a little bit more publicly. Right. It wasn't immediate, but I do take your point that there is a lot of support within the base, I think, for him, as evidenced by the popular support in the election. Okay, I'm going to take a quick break. Everyone's coming back after that break. We got a lot more to talk about. Stay right there. Welcome back to Power Play. I'm here with our front bench, Sharon Carr, Jamie Ellerton, Carl Bélanger, and Hannah Thibodeau. I wanted to get your take also, Sharon, I'll start with you on sort of what this government looks like moving forward. 3 seats shy of a majority, but also a massive challenge in Donald Trump, who spoke about Mark Carney today. The Prime Minister says they're going to meet within the next week. The Prime Minister's office does not have as specific a date, but said it would be in the near future. Like, how fast does this turn to a proof point on the pitch Carney made during the campaign, which is like, I'm the guy to settle this whole thing? How fast do Canadians need to see action on that?
I think it's going to be fast. Now, I would say it's only been, I'm trying to keep track of time of when the election ended. I probably have still not slept more than an hour or two since. But I would say everyone's getting onboarded. MPs are getting their trainings. All that stuff is happening next week. And I think once there's a bit of an infrastructure set up, we will see some more movement. I think the U.S. and Donald Trump is going to be priority numero uno for Mark Carney, and that's going to be whether he's out there fairly soon. We just have to remember that they have to get staffed up and do all of these things, and it's going to be the first probably and the biggest thing that he needs to get done while he's in government. So I think they're going to tread it very carefully. Now, everything that we've heard, I know in the last couple of days and leading up to the campaign, we heard a bit more of Donald Trump pipe in with a bit of the 51st state rhetoric. But what we did notice was there wasn't that angry, menacing tone that came with it before when he was talking about it when it was Prime Minister Trudeau. So I think it's going to be fast. It's going to be quick. Soon enough, we're going to have a cabinet put in place. And Mark Carney, as Prime Minister, is going to have to show how he's different from the previous administration.
How important, Jamie, do you think that is? I think a lot of people are looking to see how he demarcates himself from the Trudeau years.
Yeah, frankly, I think Mark Carney's biggest appeal here is that he's been in a lot of these boardrooms and had a lot of these meetings. And I think when Canadians were looking at who they wanted to lead on this front, people who voted for Mark Carney really saw appeal there as kind of a tested hand at the wheel. I think when you look at how unpredictable Donald Trump is, I still don't think it's even clear to Mark Carney himself what exactly it is we're negotiating and what it's going to be. He made international headlines early in the campaign when he said the relationship as we know it is over. And so I think on the one hand, it is this is, I think, probably going to be a bit more protracted than perhaps some Liberals might hope it's going to be. I think he's going to have to go in there and actually see what it is actually being negotiated, what's on the table and what's there. I think Prime Minister Carney is probably going to lead the efforts for whatever goes from the PMO and the PM to the White House and President Trump himself. But I think there's also a case to be made for what now this kind of Team Canada strategy looks like. Is there a Gary Doer type person who can go be an ambassador in Washington and really work the political aspect of Washington outside of the White House and the broader administration to really advance Canada's interests? That probably means it's someone from a Conservative pedigree, if you're taking the Gary Doer example, to go and be that face for Canada while he manages Donald Trump itself. But I think there's going to be an incredible amount of uncertainty here, and I still don't think we even know what it is that's actually being negotiated.
Carl, your thoughts on how heavily scrutinized this meeting will be?
I mean, the election was about that. So it will be scrutinized. And Canadians, won't get to see the actual result of all of this for a while. But they may be quick to judge. Like Mark Carney is under pressure right now to try to solve this as fast as possible. Cannot drag on forever. And so that's why he probably just ended up with a minority on during the election, because Canadians were not sure he was going to be able to deliver results on that. And of course, can't blame him. Like Donald Trump is so unpredictable that I wouldn't put too much money on the capacity of anyone to sway in any way, shape, or form, or to wake up the next day to say, well, that deal I negotiated yesterday is the worst ever. He's done that. So, who knows where that's going to lead us.
But it's a good point, because I think there is an appetite to see a demonstrable action on the part of the Prime Minister, who promised he could do so during the campaign, Hannah. But at the same time, the reality is, goodness only knows what that means with Trump.
Well, and that's the thing. As a communications expert, it's not going to just be how he responds to what Donald Trump says in the Oval Office, in those two chairs. It's going to be every move that Mr. Carney makes while he's there. We saw the handshake with Mr. Trudeau when he was there at one point in time, too. Everything will be scrutinized. He is in front of the cameras now. This is different than being in a boardroom. And Mr. Trump, as everybody is saying, is extremely volatile. When he's sitting in those two chairs at the front of the room with the president, he cannot be drawn in by any of the people sitting on those sofas off to the side, like a J.D. Vance, like anyone else who will be sitting there. He has to be very careful about what he says. He can't look too chummy with the president as well. And he has to ensure that Canadians feel comfortable that when he goes down to meet with the president, that he has control of this. And it's a big ask. And that is what that's what he's been fighting for the past 35 days. And now the proof will be in the pudding.
I got to leave it there. Thanks, everyone. I appreciate it. Our front bench, Sharon Carr, Jamie Ellerton, Carl Belanger, and Hannah Thibodeau. We're back in just a moment.
Great relationship. He called me up yesterday. He said, "Let's make a deal." He was running for office. They both hated Trump, and it was the one that hated Trump, I think, the least that won. I actually think the Conservative hated me much more than the so-called liberal. He's a pretty liberal guy. But no, I spoke to him yesterday. Couldn't have been nicer, and I congratulated him. He's a very nice gentleman, and he's going to come to the White House very shortly, within the next week or less.
U.S. President Donald Trump there making some news, saying that Prime Minister Mark Carney will come to the White House to meet with him within the next week or so. We did not get confirmation from the Prime Minister's office on that. We are told that there's no specific date at this point, but that it will be in the near future. So certainly something to keep our eyes on. The other bit of news on the show, looking ahead to Pierre Poilievre and whether he remains as leader of the Conservative Party. Andrew Scheer says he will remain, but no decision has been made on whether or not he'll try to run in another seat, a safer seat, for example, or who will lead the party in the House of Commons. I'll leave Power Play there. I'm Vashi Kapelos. Thanks for watching.